I know we talked about this a long time ago, but with different types of assets, there's actually different, like, I think, down payment requirements. Like multifamily, they're usually a little bit more lenient because it's less risk. Office, I think, is considered higher risk for some lenders. So can you talk through like multifamily versus industrial versus office versus retail?
Yeah. So I mean, like, again, to your point, different lenders will have different risk, adverse, on what they perceive essentially, right? Generally speaking, multifamily will require, the lease in terms of the down payments. And then once you go to the retail, office, actually industrial is the highly desirable asset right now. So typically the lenders can do a bigger loan to value and then come office, and then come retail. Retail is
retail's last. I thought office was last.
Retail depends. Yeah. So I mean, like, again, different lenders will have different approach.
Welcome back, and I'm so excited to welcome Matt Wong, who I've worked with so many times with all of my clients. He's amazing. He's saved a lot of my deals in commercial real estate. So if you're an entrepreneur and you've ever wondered, how can I buy a building, or can I even buy a building for my business? Or if you just want to learn how you can potentially acquire an investment property on the commercial side because you've invested in residential long enough and you're like, I kind of want to diversify. I'm curious what's the process. I'm curious what's the down payment. Matt is your guy for that stuff. He knows everything about commercial real estate, and he's my go-to resource. And he's going to be the first man on either of these podcasts on YouTube. So, really special to be able to be number one, right? And so thank you, Matt, for making time to sit down and just chat about commercial loans, right? Because he is definitely the expert, and I'm a big believer in always going to the expert and seeking out the experts. Like, I know what I know from a broker and also from an investor standpoint, but I turned to Matt to help me analyze deals. He helped my mom, my family, when we acquired a property for our 1031.
Yes,
that was in
indeed.
2022, right?
2022, yes.
Yeah. And Matt's great because he will actually help. I remember we were looking at the financials and running the numbers and stuff. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs are just always busy and a million miles a minute. And so it's nice to have someone on your team who knows how to run the numbers for you. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Cathey, for inviting. So I'm very excited to talk to everybody about commercial loan, kind of debunk, some of the myths that you hear in the market, and obviously, love to kind of educate people.
Of course. I think starting off, one of the main, I think, misconceptions or unknowns is really the down payment, right? The amount of capital required, cash on hand required to acquire commercial property. And that can range from the SBA, 10%.
10%.
That's the lowest, right?
Yeah.
That's the lowest. And then it can go up to investment properties that's based on DSCR.
Correct.
So it's sometimes a random percent. I remember ours was really random. It was 36.2 or something weird like that, right?
Yes.
So it's not necessarily a fixed or...
Yes, yeah. So essentially, you are right, Cathey. The down payment on the commercial loan really depends on a lot of factors. It's not like black and white or residential. It depends on the property type that you are trying to acquire. It also depends on, what is the purpose of you acquiring the properties. Like you mentioned earlier, if you are planning to occupy for your business, SBA is a great program, with only 10%, minimum down payment. But where you want to jump into, let's say, investment, portfolio, start acquiring real estate, again, depending on the property type and that net income of that property that the property generated. That's what I've seen right now in the market, that, it's not about the minimum down payment that you need to put it in. It's more towards how much income that this property can generate, right? So as an example, for office investment, generally the bank can go up to 75% in terms of the loan. Or even sometimes 80% too,
For office?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, but what happens right now, with the asking price, with the lower cap rate, and a lot of the different stuff, the DSCR, it kind of, requires the borrower to put more money down. So that's what it is. Every time, I got a call from customer mentioning, how much down payment do I need to put it in? I was like, hold on a second.
It depends. It depends on the NOI. And That's why like I get the same calls, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was like, this is not residential. This is why you work with a commercial broker and you don't work with a residential agent. This is why you go to a commercial lender. It's so different, right? Because it's like, you have to understand. And it's, I didn't know that office go that high because I thought, I know multifamily can go up to that, but based on today's interest rates and today's NOI and what the price is, so you have to take into account the NOI, which affects the cap rate based on the price, and that's what's gonna basically dictate. And so nowadays, like, what are you seeing mostly as the approximate down payment based on all
so
that?
So we have seen right now in the range, anywhere from 60 to 70% loan to value, essentially right now.
Yeah, so people have to come in with 30 to 40% down.
Correct. Yeah, that is basically on the investment side. And the unoccupied, obviously, we still do a lot of SBA 504, loans. Where 10% will suffice. Yeah. And do you want to talk a little bit about the SBA and like the requirements, like the 51%, all that kind of other stuff? Yeah. So the SBA program, it's a government-backed program that is really, really good for small business who just started, and would like to expand, whether they would like to acquire any capital expenditure, if you can think of it. It's not necessarily has to be real estate. It could be a big, expensive equipment that you want to acquire.
Well, that's for the 7A, right? The 504 is
504 can also do the equipment as
really?
well, actually.
I didn't see. I'm learning something new too.
Part of it. You can also include tenant improvement into the 504. Let's say if you buy a gray shell building and want to build inside, you can also use the SBA 504 for it as well, But essentially, you are required to come with a 10% down. The rate is very, very attractive right now. It's in the, I would say right now, it's in the lower 6% right now.
Is that the blended or just the SBA portion?
The SBA portion, and even the blended rate is around low 6% right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
so it's below the normal.
Oh, yes. And I believe that it is below than the residential mortgage, traditional residential mortgage.
Yeah, residential's around like the 7s now,
Correct,
I think.
Correct, yeah. And another cool thing also is that, the DSCR requirement that we talk about with the SBA, it's a lower requirement. Typically, lender is looking from anywhere 1.25 to 1.5 of DSCR. Like our bank, we look at 1.25 DSCR. What it means
for investment, sure.
For investment or for the owner user overall. But what is that DSCR? A lot of people don't talk about it. DSCR is actually very similar to
debt service coverage ratio.
Service coverage ratio. Yes. Very similar to DTI ratio on the residential, except that you kind of invert it. You take the income divided by the debt. But essentially, the business need to generate 25% cushions, from the net operating income to cover the debt service. That's what it is. But the debt service coverage ratio for SBA is lower. Some lenders just require it to be 1-to-1, or sometimes it could be 1 to 1.1 to 1.15 as well.
So there's no standard?
It's a much lower. Yes, so it depends on the bank's, risk tolerance. How much risk that they want to take.
Interesting. Okay. And then with the SBA, can you talk a little bit also about the prepayment penalties? Because I know that's another thing. I know I've had clients ask, like, well, what if I want to move in 3 years or 5 years? Like, how does the prepayment work? Yeah,
so SBA, one of the pro getting the SBA is that it offers you the fully fixed term, 25-year or 20-year or 15-year. But it also comes with longer, prepayment penalty. Generally will be the first 10 years. Okay. So
I didn't even know that. I thought it was usually 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Or is that only on investor?
No, will be 10. It depends on the coupon rate and other stuff, but generally speaking, it will be the first 10 year. I always kind of mention it's like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So it's similar to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, why is it long? Because the government, creates this program for small business, right? So they are not looking to borrow it to investors, essentially. They are not looking for a short-term money. They want to make sure the small business, really contribute to the economy. It's for the long-term purpose. So that's why they kind of hold you for longer term as well.
But I mean, as a business owner and an investor, you do want to hold long term anyway. Like my family, you know, we hold our properties for 10 plus years usually.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think that's important to mention, because I have a client that we're talking about this now, is the cap on the amount, the loan amount.
Yeah.
Right? There's a cap on the SBA loan amount.
It will be 5 million. So there is a cap how much that you can do for the SBA. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what if it's an owner user and they're looking to purchase the property for their business, but it's over 5 million? What are the options?
Yeah, so they still can use the SBA 504 depending on the amount, right? Okay. So the SBA just dictate that, you know, the SBA program need to cover at least 5 million, you know, but then SBA portion, typically SBA 504 structure is 50% is the bank loan, 40% is the SBA, and then 10% is the capital required by the borrowers. Okay. So the 5 million threshold essentially on that second loan, the 40%, you know, it can
so it's a 5 million. Oh, so that's
correct.
So I thought it was a loan amount.
No, so you can technically get a 10 million loan properties, you know, with 5 million on the bank loan, 4 million.
I'm learning new stuff today. I'm like, I'm learning because I thought it was 5 million total. I didn't know it was 5 million on the SBA portion.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Okay. So I learned something new.
And again, you know, we always, you know, so that's why you need to sit down with your trusted bankers, really talk about your investment strategies like you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
What is your game plan with this property that you acquire?
Yeah.
Are you going to exchange it for a bigger property in the next 3-5 years?
Yeah.
Or are you going for the long haul essentially, right? So that's really key to have an expert, you know, to have that discussion.
And I also think that's important because I know I've had clients ask me this as well, that on the SBA loan, to qualify based on the DTI, it's based on business income only, right?
Correct.
So they can't take into account the rental income, even if the 40% of it is occupied?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it has the business must be able to service the debt by itself.
With just the business income.
Correct.
Yeah. So you can rent out. So you have to occupy 51% as a business owner to utilize SBA 504.
Yeah.
You can rent out 49%, but your business has to be able to cover 100% of the debt service, even though you don't need to. So that's that's something that's important to know, because I've had a lot of clients say like, well, what about the rental income that we're getting? If, you know, I was like, you can take that into account, but the bank's not going to take that into account.
Correct. Yeah, essentially the banks wants to know what if the situation, right? What if the tenant vacates and you cannot find any tenants, you know, at all, right? For the next 2-3 years, then obviously you cannot count on that additional income, right?
Exactly.
So that's why the lender take a more conservative approach in their underwriting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So and then for the if they want, so why, I would say, like, I'm curious to myself, why would someone not go SBA and go conventional as an owner user? Is there reasons for that?
Well, the biggest reason is on the down payment, you know, as well as the fixed term, you know, long-term amortization that SBA offers. And also the underwriting guideline is much lower than the conventional because the DSCR is lower, right? And the rate environment right now between the conventional and SBA is actually very similar, you know? So a lot of people thought that SBA rate will be much, much higher. Then it's about the same right now with the conventional. Yeah.
So then why? Because I know some people choose to still do the conventional for as an owner user. And it's what, like 20 or 20. What's the conventional down payment if it's?
So the conventional one, the starting down payment started at 15% down.
Oh, for owner. Okay, so it's not that much different.
Correct. Okay. It does give you a lower advantage of the, what do you call, in terms of the fees, because there won't be any SBA related fees that you have to pay, right? Other than that is that timing, you know? So conventional financing just require the bank to approve the loan. That's it, right? But whereas SBA 504, the bank has to approve it, but also at the same time, SBA also has to approve it.
Which can take a long time. We've dealt with that. I've dealt with that multiple times.
Yes, and you can, that's why it is you need to sit down with a lender who really understands the SBA 504 program, because you can actually underwrite it at the same time. You know, a lot of banks, what they do is that they get the bank approved and then SBA approved, whereas you can actually submit files together at the same time. So that will save you a lot of time.
Yeah, Matt actually closes my deals on time. I've had those lenders that are like, yeah, we'll close in like 45 or 60 days. And I'm like, but I've learned my lesson. So pro tip, if you're looking to buy a commercial property, I do this for all of my buyer clients. I actually build in a clause that's basically a unilateral right for the buyer. What that means is I make sure that the purchase agreement has a clause in there that says, you know, if buyer has done everything in good faith and the financing process is delayed, all that buyer has to do is pay an additional security deposit to the title company, which goes towards the purchase price, and they can extend the financing contingency by whatever it is, like 15 days or 30 days. And so that saved one of our clients, like the one that Matt helped me with, that the deal almost fell apart because we were in escrow. It was like, I think it was like 3 weeks into the escrow process with a big bank locally. I won't say their name. And then they tell me, we can't get this done. I was like, we're 3 weeks into the escrow process. And then now you tell me, like, you need to tell me in week 1 that you can't get it done, right? And then so then I called Matt and he saved that deal, thank goodness. But they went to him, the other bank, instead of Matt. They talked to both lenders because of a slightly lower rate. But I was like, sometimes you don't go with the cheapest one because it's like, you can't get it done, right? So there was, I don't know how much difference there were, maybe like a quarter of a point.
Yeah,
it was a
very minor.
Very slight difference with the rate. And so with my next client, I was transparent with them because as a professional in real estate, I still have to be like, here's your options. You can choose who you want as your lender. I can't tell you. I can give you options. And I told her, I was like, look, this happened with my last client. This is slightly lower, but there's a chance they might not close. This is slightly higher, but I know he'll close if he tells you he will, right? And so that's something else to keep in mind on commercial lending. Sometimes people are like, penny wise, pound foolish. And I'm like, you might save, a quarter of a point. You might save a little bit on origination fees or appraisals. But it's like, if you can't get a property, like, what's the point, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And it's like, also, the other thing, it's like the amount of money, like, for instance, I have a client, this was before I think we started working together. It was years ago. But I don't know when we met, in 21 or 22.
Even earlier than that, I feel like it.
Well, because in 2020, because I don't think we knew each other in 2020. Because in 2020, my client, I helped her buy a building for $720,000, utilizing SBA. So her down payment was, and she was established. So I think her down payment was like 10% down. So it's like 70-something thousand, right? In last year, in 2023, so she held it for 3 years. I helped her sell it for $1.3 million.
Wow.
So she net over $500,000.
Yeah.
Over net to pocket after paying my commissions, after closing costs, after the prepayment penalty.
2 years.
After the prepayment penalty. Wow. So there's a prepayment penalty on it, but I ran the numbers for her because she's like, how much? I was like, because she didn't know about prepayment. I was like, hey, just to let you know, I know you want to sell it, you want to see how much it costs, but I'm gonna net it out for you. I'm gonna have the title company like do the net sheet. And I was the one who reached out to the lenders for her and figured out the prepayment penalty. And I was like, even with the prepayment penalty, even with the closing costs, even with the commission, you're gonna net over $500,000.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
So she's one of my really good friends. A lot of my clients become really good friends because I help them make a lot of money. So and when you help someone make $500,000, they kind of like you a lot.
There's no return that will give you that much return.
In 3 years. So she bought it in let me see, it was November of 2020. We closed on the purchase. October of 2023, we sold it. Yeah. So just under 3 years, literally.
Yeah, I mean, that's very relevant right now nowadays. Yes. You know, last year, a lot of business owners, a lot of investors are kind of holding back to see how the economy rolls out. But it looks like 2024 will be a busy year.
Oh, it's crazy.
I always sit down with the client or with the prospect, always educating them, I'm sure that you heard about the sayings that, hey, you marry the property, but you just date, the rate, right? So there was a lot of concern on the interest rate, but that's why you want to sit down with professional advisors, kind of talk to you about the investment strategies. If you really like the property is in a great location, pull it,
And it's also like big picture, like we talked about, right? Because even if you're stuck in a rate, right? Let's just say in commercial, there's prepayment penalties. It's the truth of it. You probably can't get out of your loan. But again, she made over $500,000 net, right? So you have to think about it like, okay, I'm buying this. The interest rate might be kind of high, but let's say the interest rate's at, I don't know, let's just say 7%, right? But the property appreciates at 10, 12, 15%. Then you're like, what's my differential between the appreciation and the interest rate, right? I'm still making more on appreciation. And that's something that people usually don't think about when they're thinking about real estate. But it's like my family, we're first generation immigrants.
Yeah.
My parents are from Taiwan, right? Where I was born in the US, but they came here with $5,000. Our portfolio is over $20 million today. And I always say opportunities don't go away, they go to someone else.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna hem and haw over like the cost of doing business is what I call it, right? So yes, interest rates might be a little bit higher, but what are you netting? That's all that matters. Sometimes it's like the analogy I like to use. If you're looking to rent a retail space for a restaurant, right? Would you rather we're in Las Vegas, we're on Rainbow, right? My office is on Rainbow. Would you rather be on Rainbow, which is like a prime busy street and everyone sees you, you have all the visibility? Or would you rather be on like here in our case, like, I don't know, some Tenaya, some Stride Street, right? You'll pay a lot less for rent over there, but you won't get the visibility, you won't get the frontage, you won't get the like value out of it.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of the same kind of concept. Sometimes you have to pay its cost of doing business, so.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that the location should be always the number one priority when you are looking for real estate, definitely.
And especially in commercial, like we know this, being in the industry as long as we both have been, like good properties for sale are like a needle in a haystack. So for every, like 50 or 100 properties you find for a lease, you might find 1 or 2 good ones for sale.
Yeah.
Because they're so rare to come by and my clients are often like, there's only 5 options. I'm like, literally, there's only 5 options listed that fit your parameters in all of Las Vegas. And they're like, are you serious? I was like, I can pull up on my computer and show you, like, on the market. I mean, I did a lot of off-market deals, like,
Jordan's.
Yeah, one of my he doesn't mind if I mention his name. He's a good friend of mine. Usually I won't mention client names, but, like, he's one of my best friends, so he's cool. But, like, Jordan's property. But a lot of my clients that become friends, I found them off-market opportunities because it was so rare. But even with off-market, it's a needle in a haystack. Like, I had to really dig to find those.
Yeah.
Like, that year in 2022, when it was, like, so busy and inventory scarce, I did over 26 million in off-market transactions.
Wow. Okay.
But it was a lot of, like, calling people, like, hey,
yes.
Hi, I'm a buyer. And so, yeah. But it's like, so the investment side now. Okay, so that's owner user, there's SBA, and then there's conventional. SBA is 10% down for most of the time, but it's also 15% if they are new, right?
If they're a high-risk industry or new, yes.
What's considered high-risk industry?
High-risk industry will be like, for example, one that I'm doing right now, a funeral home.
Oh.
I am actually financing a funeral home with a crematorium. So when there's a crematorium, then that will be considered high risk.
Okay,
yes,
so that's 15% down.
Yeah, or
I thought it was because it's a new business now.
It also can be a new business. For example, if the client doesn't have any experience at all in this type of industry, then the SBA will qualify as a new business owners, and there'll be risk involved, right? So then they will require 15%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So SBA 10 to 15% down. Conventional owner user is 15 to what?
15 to 25.
Okay. Yeah. So why would they require 25 over 15?
It depends on the property type, right? Is it a Class A type of property or Class C type of property? Locations. What is the industry? It's really important too, right?
Yeah.
A manufacturer will have a lower default rate versus, let's say, I don't know, a retail, mom and pop shop, right? So those kind of factor also will come to play. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I like with commercial loan. So I've been doing residential mortgage loan in the previous years, and one of the reasons that I jump into commercial loan is that there is no black and white.
Yeah.
It really
it's problem solving. I love it.
Exactly.
I was just talking to a friend about that.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so much more interesting when you get to solve unique problems, for me at least too. I'm the same way where I've never I own a residential brokerage firm, but I've never actually done residential deals myself because I like the challenge of solving problems on the commercial side. And people are like, why do you like that? It's so much more work. I was like, it's so interesting.
Yes.
Right? It's because you have to really think creatively and outside of the box. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. But when you do know how to do that, it's so much fun, and it's very lucrative too.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
Really
the dollar
cool.
amount is higher than residential,
yeah.
right?
I mean, it's also tougher to navigate. There's a lot more hurdles. I mean, so Matt and I, there's one deal we jumped through 1,000,001 hurdles. I feel like everything that could have gone wrong with that one went wrong with that one. Like the appraisal.
Oh, yes. We have to go back and then find another comps and then fight for it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I love about working with Matt is because I remember that time it was like we were in Centennial in the Northwest, which is if you know in Vegas, you'll know that neighborhood. And then they put comps on Central West, by Rancho and UMC. And I was like, that's a totally different area of town and it's so irrelevant. Mm-hmm. How can you compare Centennial with with Central West, like I was like, you are not using relevant comps.
Yeah.
But this goes back to how rare it is to find commercial properties for sale.
Exactly.
And that's why they couldn't find the comps. Because they're like, well, nothing sold there. I was like, yes, but that's why it's worth more, because it's so rare. And that was an off-market one too.
Exactly.
And so people don't realize that. It's like, if you see a good opportunity on the commercial side, you don't just wait for it or wait for interest rates to drop. Like, you hop on that. Like, you know, my family, for instance, like personal shares that will, like one of the properties we bought, for a little over $3 million is worth over $12 million now. I mean, we've held that for like over 10 years.
Yeah.
We've held it for over 12 years. No, almost 12 years now, I think. This year will be year 12. But like with that, like, you know, we hopped on it. We have another property that we bought for around 900-ish. But like we put in it was like deferred maintenance bad. Like we had roof was leaking. Like, you know, it was like value add like crazy. Like we had to redo the parking lot, we had to redo the pylons. Like it was a lot of stuff. So we put a lot of capital for that one. So it wasn't just like 900 was what we would carve for, but our basis is probably closer to 1.5 or 2. But that one's probably around 3 million now.
3 million.
So you know, it's like so it's like I mean, that's the thing you have to think about. Like, what's the equity potential and equity gain that I can get from this? Not, oh, what's my interest rate? Like you're looking at the wrong thing. And I think that's when commercial real estate, if you want to get into investing, you need to realize that. Because when I speak with I don't know if you're probably speaking, like investors that have only invested in residential, they don't really think like that.
Commercial.
They don't think like that yet.
Yeah.
They just think like, oh, interest rate, cash flow. And I'm like, it's not a cash flow play most of the time.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny because I always talk to residential investors. I always tell them that, you know, hey, I saw, especially when I see them that, gee, you have like 12 residential. Are you going to maybe graduate from residential and start maybe looking into apartments and maybe eventually going to commercial, you know? And I talk about, you know, about the headache, you know, residential, you have to deal with the tenant, you know, a lot of repairs, a lot of maintenance. Whereas commercial, you can have what we call the triple net lease.
Yes,
you know,
and no. Yes and no. There's still pros and cons.
So there should be stuff that obviously you have to worry. But again, you know, you're talking about less headache.
It's definitely less headache. Like my family, we started with residential. We did single family homes, apartments. Like back in New York, we did condos and co-ops. And duplexes, fourplexes, all that. And then we eventually went to apartment buildings first. So like 30-unit apartment building in Brooklyn, New York, like mixed use in Bridgeport, Connecticut, like retail ground floor, apartment second floor. And then now we have all commercial out here. But I would say it's a different headache. Like it's not the headaches that you get on the residential side where I used to have tenants calling me on like Friday night of like, their kid flushed their kid flushed the toilet down the toilet. I was like, that's a you problem. Like, but I still have to fix it, right? Because their kid flushed the toilet down the toilet and now it's all clogged and overflowing. And those are the calls I used to get when I was in residential. But the commercial ones also, I think, something else to keep in mind. And it's part of the loan process actually. And I think we should talk about it on the investor side is capital reserves for working capital.
Exactly.
Because some of the commercial headaches are like, we had an underground leak with, I think it was a sewer or pipe system. And we had to like dig up the freaking parking lot, get the company and trench it. And I think it was like a $50,000 problem or something like that. And on the residential side, they don't think about that. People don't think about I need 50 grand potentially for like a repair that I didn't expect.
Yeah, I agree. The commercial maintenance, typically when you hear about it, it will be like a large dollar amount, you know. But again, it's not like smaller items like, you know, residential.
And in residential, you can use the, the home warranty and pay for that. And you kind of mitigate your risk on repairs.
Absolutely.
And so I always, when I talk to investors, I don't know if you do the same, but I tell them, I'm like, commercial investing might not be for you. And let me tell you why. You know, maybe you should just stick with residential. You need a lot of cash on hand, right? Because in addition to the down payment, that's part of it. But also, I don't know the exact reserve amount that I remember we talked about.
It really depends again, but
loan.
We typically look anywhere from 3 months to 6 month reserve, you know, of all your debt payment essentially. But to your point, yes, you know, there are a lot of times when clients come to me and say, I want to buy my first building for $3 million. And then when I look at the cash position, I was like, okay, you don't have enough or you will use it all? What is your plan, right? So that's something that we look into our underwriting process is that how much reserve, that you have afterwards as well. And at the end of the day, cash is the king, right? You know, so you want to make sure that you have enough cash. And we don't want to repeat the same mistake in '08 where
I was going to say '08 is...
Yeah, a lot of assets, but no cash, essentially, right? So
it's asset rich, cash poor.
Exactly.
A lot of landlords are dead.
You have to find that balance, you know?
Yeah. The main reason people failed, I know a lot of people that failed, unfortunately. One of my tenants used to be a landlord, and now he's a tenant, and he was telling us he owned a bunch of commercial property, and the reason was he was over leveraged. He didn't have enough working capital because one is the maintenance and repair risk, like I talked about. It could be a $50,000 problem. But beyond that, you also have to think about the vacancy risk in commercial. So unlike residential, where at least in the Vegas market, it's a very hot residential rental market, always almost, like as far as I know. So I don't see residential properties vacant for more than a month, if even. Usually it's like a few days to a few weeks in the residential. Like if you have an apartment, if you have a home, if you have a condo, a townhouse, you get a tenant almost right away. On the commercial side, you could not get a tenant for six months, a year, 2 years, depending on the kind of property and the location in town. I've had properties where like it's a great location, it's well maintained and everything, and like we have a bunch of tours, a bunch of activities, a bunch of interest, and it still sits vacant like a year later. And so you have to think about that. When a tenant leaves, what's the carrying cost of, okay, what if I don't lease this out for 6, 10, 12 months, right? Do I have enough to carry and service the debt at that point?
Exactly.
And a lot of people don't think about that because they don't know if they're coming from residential investing. And so that's why a lot of people I'm telling them, like, you shouldn't go into commercial yet.
Yeah. Another key aspect that I want to point out as well is that when you start talking with investors, they talk about cap rates a lot.
Yes, cap rates.
But what cap rates is basically mentioned is basically how much the net operating income, the return on assets essentially.
NOI over purchase price?
Correct, over the purchase price. But I always, kind of challenge the investors to look closely on the cap rates. You'll be surprised that, a property can be listed for 7.2 or 7.6% cap rate. But when you really look at the operating expenses, they are very, very skinny. And an example that I very clear, a 1980 building, doesn't expect any deferred maintenance, doesn't have any budget, for debt repairs. So that's why it's really important that, don't just look at the cap rate, but you have to look at the expense,
and also both of those, and I've been on teams. I started my commercial real estate career at CBRE. I have my own firm now, but when I started, I was on a big investment sales firm, and I know how they clean up the OMs, right? So I'll give you guys a pro tip, and Matt knows this too, how they clean up the OMs, right? And I've been guilty of it too, like as a landlord and investor myself, right? Because there are some expenses that are one time and you're not going to put that in your expenses.
Correct.
Okay, I'm replacing the HVAC unit. That's one in every 5 or 10 years. I'm not going to put that on my income and expenses because it'll make my DSCR look bad. And it's also not an expense, it's a capital improvement. And so the capital improvements are not listed on there. And so if you're looking to buy a commercial property, you got to look at, okay, give me your capital improvements also, not just your expenses. Because usually they only include the recurring expenses. And recurring expenses is only a portion of your repairs and maintenance. You have capital improvements, like a roof thing. Okay, you replace the roof once every X number of years. Or you fix your sprinkler system. Or you replace the HVAC system. Or you do tenant improvements, another thing that they don't take into account, right? Tenant improvements is something that's very relevant and common in commercial real estate, but not necessarily like residential. You just do the cosmetics like flooring, paint, right? But in commercial, we have TIs or tenant improvements, which means like if you have a gray shell space or if you have the second generation space, you have to renovate it for the next tenant before they go in, or you have to give them an allowance to do it themselves.
And a pro tip as well is that lender will typically add back as well all those capital expenditure to your bottom line. But the only caveat is that, you need to obviously tell the lenders, hey, I'm doing this improvement, and another pro tip is that instead of putting it on the lump it into repair maintenance line items on the tax return, I always recommend the client to kind of list it out, and the other statement on your tax return, either HVAC replacement on how much, so that will give the clearer, picture for the lenders as well. And lender can actually add back to that as well, to the bottom line, which is a nice thing.
It is, So it's very different on the commercial. And on the investing side, the other thing I wanted to talk about is like, I know there's different, I know we talked about this a long time ago, but with different types of assets, there's actually different, like I think down payment requirements. Like multifamily, they're usually a little bit more lenient because it's less risk. office, I think, is considered higher risk for some lenders. So can you talk through like multifamily versus industrial versus office versus retail?
Yeah. So I mean, like again, to your point, different lenders will have different risk, adverse, on what they are, what they perceive essentially, right? Like generally speaking, multifamily will require, the lease in terms of the down payments, and then once you go to the retail, office, industrial is the highly desirable asset right now. So typically the lenders can do a bigger loan to value, and then come office, and then come retail. Retail is
retail's last. I thought office was last.
Retail
Interesting.
depends, yeah. So I mean, like again, different lenders will have different approach. But again, office, a lot of people mention about office is struggling, but believe it or not, Vegas is not one of them.
Vegas is not, no. So there's actually the data that supports it.
Exactly.
You've looked at it too, right?
Yeah, so the Vegas vacancy report, I just looked at it, it was at 5%, whereas San Francisco is at 22%, Los Angeles at 15%, that's high. But what makes Vegas office unique is that it's not a bullpen type of offices, it's a small offices like this, It's very easy to rent it out to different profiles. So, so that's a surprising thing. So I always tell people, have you looked into office? Lately it might be.
I know I get so much resistance when I talk to clients from California. And they're like, "Oh, I want to invest in commercial." And I was like, "What about office?" And they're like, "No, I don't want to do it." I was like, "I own mostly office here, and it's been very good. Like we keep our occupancy around 90-something% all the time." And they're like, "How?" And I was like, it's not like California. And I was like, it's totally different. And there's also a lot of a lot of our tenants are medical. So there's like mental health, a pain clinic, autism therapy. And so a lot of these are recession resistant, and also they have to be in person. Like if you're doing autism therapy for your children, you're not gonna, they're not gonna do that over the phone, same with a pain clinic. And we have one that's like lymphatic massage. So it's like manual, obviously you have to go in person. And so there's a lot of these industries out here that are very different. Med spas are another one, permanent makeup. There's so many office tenants here that, unlike California where it was all tech, and honestly, we're getting a lot of the absorption. I actually my team toured this morning with a friend of mine who owns the company, and they're a big tech company. And so we're in Vegas very, very lucky in that we're actually shielded, and we're getting the opposite effect of New York and California. So all the people who fled the Bay Area, who fled LA, who are fleeing San Francisco, San Diego as well. San Francisco, San Diego, LA.
All the California.
They're all coming here, right? Why? Because we have no state income tax here.
Yes.
We have no state income tax here. And so it's really beneficial for high income earners, which most tech companies are high income earners, to be here. And so our office space actually has a lot of demand. Like the client today was looking from 8,000 to 10,000 square feet. So it's
we've seen also a lot of influx from neighboring state coming in, even Hawaii.
Hawaii. We're the ninth island.
I deal with a client who is going to relocate the business from Hawaii to Vegas. So Vegas is still growing. There are still a lot of opportunity to grow ourselves.
I agree, and I'm very bullish on Vegas. Clearly, we have a huge portfolio here. And the reason I'm so bullish, so my family started in New York about 30 years ago with investing. I've been in the family business a little over 20 years. Child of immigrants, the hustle. My mom's like, you work, live in this house, you want food to eat, you work, right? So I've been working since I was 12 years old, literally. Because people were like, did you start when you were 12? I was like, actually, I did start when I was 12.
Wow.
And so the reason, so this is how I know what I know at my age, right? Because I started when I was literally 12 years old. But basically, my mom is amazing. I learned most of what I know from her. And I was working with her since I was 12. And one of the things I realized is to look at things from a macro level, big picture. Most people think they don't go big picture. And big picture means Vegas, if you think about product life cycle, right? If you business 101, there's that growth stage, and then there's that maturity, and then there's that decline. You know what I mean?
We are still in the growth
We're still in the growth stage. We're just getting all of our sports teams now. We still have development going on. We're still diversifying our economy. It's amazing how you get in. And if you look at things, again, macro, zoom out. What's our price per square foot compared to national, compared to international, right? I go to a lot of national and international real estate conferences, and I talk to people, and I'm like, look at the price per square foot in Hong Kong. Look at the price per square foot in New York City.
So far away.
Look at the price per square foot in San Francisco. Our price per square foots here are really low compared to the rest of the US and compared to the rest of the world, especially when you're talking about a major international city with a major international airport.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so bullish on Vegas, because it's always been an equity play. And that's, if you're looking to build long-term wealth in the 7 and 8 figure range, and I'm living proof of this, you got to look big picture and long term.
Yeah, I agree, because I am very proud living in Las Vegas, and as you mentioned, we are still in a bullish
still growing,
mode.
yeah.
Just look at the city, used to be all about hotel and casinos, but it has changed dramatically.
And the industrial, like you touched upon,
sports,
our industrial market has boomed.
Yeah, I always funny about it. I was talking to my associate, my associate was complaining about the traffic, that is happening in the 259, 15 of the interstate.
The traffic's gone pretty bad.
I kind of joke with her that, hey, see on the big picture that it tells you that the city is growing. So when you see a lot of construction, road, money pouring into the road, that tells you the city is growing.
And it's still nothing compared to New York or LA traffic.
Exactly.
We're just spoiled.
Yeah.
We're spoiled here in Vegas because we're not used to any. Are you always from here, or?
I live in Arizona for a while and then moved here. Yes,
okay, yeah. So I was like, I'm from New York, so I was like, this is nothing. I mean, compared to New York traffic, this is cake. So it's bad compared to when we moved here. I moved here in 2014, but like, just it's great to see the growth. Like you touched upon industrial, right? And so industrial is something interesting where that's one of the sectors that's really diversifying in Las Vegas. There's like a huge boom and a lot of new development in the industrial out here.
Yeah. Look at the Speedway, on the north part,
Apex, Apex out there. Yeah, it's great. And so when does it make sense for you to buy commercial property? I know we talked about like why you shouldn't buy is if you don't have enough cash, but why you should buy commercial real estate. So this is why I tell people, I'm like, if you're an entrepreneur with a lot of income and with a lot of cash on hand and you need depreciation, commercial real estate is one of the best investment and tax strategies in one that you could ever get, because you're going to be able to depreciate and you can use something called cost segregation, which a lot of people don't realize. Cost segregation allows you to accelerate the depreciation on certain components of the commercial property, which you get a lot more that you can accelerate depreciation on, offset any of your passive income for the most part, unless you are like me, who is a full-time real estate professional status for taxes. And this goes into taxes, and I'm not a CPA, but I'm just telling you guys kind of what I've done before to mitigate my taxes.
Yeah.
And it's using cost segregation. And so if you're like a high income earner, entrepreneur, you have rental income, let's say from some residential properties, and you're like, oh, like I pay a lot of taxes. I have my business income and I have rental income. That cost segregation could potentially offset your rental income because it's your passive income and it's a passive loss. And so you could kind of negate some of it sometimes. Like, again, I'm not a CPA. Ask your CPA about this. A lot of them don't even know. It's crazy. I've talked to I don't know, I think I interviewed like a dozen CPAs and a lot of them don't know what cost segregation is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, isn't this your job? Like, how do I know more about taxes than you do? Like, literally, I'm like, I just know it from like being like, nerding out because I'm like, I don't want to pay this much, right? But commercial real estate is one of and you know about it, right?
Yes, yes. I agree that, starts with your CPA. So don't just go to your CPA and file the taxes. Really sit down with them and ask their opinion on the line items, on the operating expenses. I have a story where I was just doing a small loan, a 50,000, really small, a long time ago with a chiropractor, right? But then when I look at the financial, I noticed something that is like, wow, it's an aha moment. One of the items is basically on the rent expense. The chiropractor pays close to $500,000 in rent expense in a year.
Oh my God.
So that kind of prompted me the questions like, what is your thought? I'm paying $500,000 to the
why don't you buy?
and that's what the start of the conversation, that the business owner is looking, wow, you might be right, and the business owner, basically the chiropractor, told me that I always thought that commercial loan would be very expensive. I know a lot of down payment again, right? Back to the basic again, and then
misconceptions about it.
Exactly. So so I highly recommend, start with your CPA, but also start with your banker. See what we can offer.
Just have a conversation. I mean, you could talk to Matt, or I can introduce you to Matt. Kind of, contact me. I'll put you guys in touch. But it's like that's really important. Like my client that you worked with, right? she had her business for 18 years. And I think her rent was more than the mortgage, right?
Yes, yes.
So her rent was significantly more.
Significant, yeah.
What was her rent? I think it was like, I want to say almost double, no?
Yeah, that's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, I think her rent was almost double what her mortgage payment ended up being when she bought. And she's like, I wish I knew this way earlier, because she was paying rent for 18 years.
That's crazy.
You know, the amount of money and the amount of equity you could have built over that time. Like, instead of flushing it down the drain, you could have had hundreds of thousands in equity. And I was like, some of these people. That's
I agree.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And I meet clients because they're like, I didn't know. I thought it was so tough. I didn't know I could buy a building, right?
Exactly.
And so I've had friends that have had their business 10, 15, 20 years and they didn't know. And then they meet me and they're like, I wish I knew you 15 years ago. And I was like, I know, you could have had a few $100,000 in equity. I was like, I'm sorry, but I'm like, I don't know why no one educated you.
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
crazy.
I mean, like, you gotta start somewhere. You know, it doesn't have to be super big, fancy, luxurious. It could be something small space, and then you start graduating from there, and then go to the next level.
Oh yeah.
Once you get to the habit, you will like it. You know? You like the
We
grind.
started small. Like I said, we started with little residential. We did 1031 exchange, traded up, and
now we have 20 plus million.
Now we have 100,000 square feet here in town.
That's crazy.
And that's just the family portfolio. I have like some small stuff outside the family portfolio that I invest into, like syndications and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to build long-term wealth and equity, like commercial real estate is the best, especially if you're a high income earner. Like I said, the tax strategy part of it is huge tax savings. If you're making high 6 figures to 7 figures, if you're sitting on a few $100,000 to $1 million plus in cash, you need to consider commercial real estate, because I have friends that have a 6-figure or multiple 6-figure tax bill and they don't invest in real estate. And I was like, why do you pay that much in taxes? I was like, you could just pay yourself. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I was like, why? Like, because I was like, I've gone there have been years that I've gotten my taxes down to like 0 legally on federal. And they're like, how'd you do that? I was like, because I invest in a lot of real estate.
And the cost segregation.
Yeah, and the cost segregation. The cost segregation is a huge one. And so my friends are like, what is this? So there's a great book on it called Tax-Free Wealth. Robert Kiyosaki's tax strategist wrote the book. And so that's what...
great.
And so again, going back to the whole tax strategy, that's investment strategy. Let's say, the cash flow that we talked about earlier, one of the things I say, and this is a big Robert Kiyosaki Rich Dad Poor Dad concept, which is like, instead of focusing just on the cash flow, which is what most people focus on, that's the status quo, that's the common thing, like cap rate, cash flow, right? I was like, focus on the equity appreciation, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because you focus on the equity appreciation, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is from now, usually when the balloon payment comes due. So commercial loans are typically, that's something important to note too. They're not they're not a fully amortized loan.
Correct.
So it's usually a balloon, like 3, 5, 7, whatever. But when that balloon payment comes due, if you bought right, ideally in a good situation, which luckily my family has experienced, you should have a decent amount of equity. What you can do is then a cash out refinance, and you pull that equity out, and then it's tax-free wealth. That's tax-free wealth, because that is a loan and not income. And it's not a sale. It's not capital gains, because you haven't actually sold. And so what we've done before is we've pulled out around $1 million of equity, tax-free.
Before you sell it.
Tax-free. And so that was one of the ways where you don't pay taxes like on that. So it's like, I didn't make income of it, but I got a loan. And so I got money to buy another property. I got some money also in my pocket on top of buying the other property.
Correct.
And that's not income. So it's not taxable income. Would you rather pay 7, 8, 9% even, let's say in the worst case scenario, on a interest on a cash out refi on a loan, or would you rather pay 20, 30% taxes, right?
Yeah. And that was funny because about a few years back, I have same borrowers who have the asset free and clear.
Yeah.
And he was trying to basically sell the property and 1031 exchange it or whatever that is. But somehow, because of the property type change, it does not qualify for the 1031 exchange. So we were doing a strategy to limit the capital gain, right? So what we do is that, like you mentioned, we do cash out refi and then sell it. And then whatever the net proceed is very minor. And then that's how you kind of skip the capital gain.
Yeah. So
again, we are not CPAs.
We're not CPAs,
but
ask your CPA. But
yes.
this is just from experience.
Yes.
It's what I've done. It's what he's done. It's what your clients have done, right? So these are just stories we're sharing from our experience.
Yeah. And it's also like protect you. You know, let's say if you got sued for it, if you have a lot of equity, you are putting yourself in jeopardy. You know, so that's why a lot of, I think you mentioned it on many of your podcasts, is that loan. It's not bad if you know how to use it properly,
There's
right?
good debt. And
exactly.
so a lot of people don't realize there's good debt. And taking on like good debt for commercial property is an amazing way to build wealth. It's leverage is amazing. It's one of the best ways to build wealth. Like people want to be like, oh, all cash. I was like, why would you do that? You should keep your cash as much as you can, right?
Exactly.
And you want to keep it for working capital. But this is like, And actually, the other thing I would want to before we wrap up was I know with commercial loans, some lenders have net worth and asset like requirements or portfolio requirements. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's not familiar to people who only invest in residential.
Yeah, so that's very important. Some lenders they do, some lenders they don't, but they look at the net worth, how much equity that you have on the business compared to the liabilities and overall. But again, different lenders will have different risk appetite, right? So some will require a higher amount net worth, some does not, in fact, but there's something that you want to kind of look into it, on your taxes, on your balance sheet, how much, net worth that you have. If you're upside down, it kind of tell you also that, hey, you are highly leveraged right now, right? So that net worth basically tell you like how responsible are you as a borrower? Are you like highly leveraged type of borrowers? Are you a lower leverage type of borrower?
Also, I thought there's experience requirements for investments.
Experience
right?
also
Because I
very
know, like
important.
with my mom, with our loan, we're like, look, we have a portfolio.
Correct.
Right? We've been in commercial real estate investing for a number of years now, so.
Correct. That experience. That's why again, commercial loan is very interesting because there's no black and white.
It's more of an art. It's more of an art than a science.
Do you know that experience can actually help mitigate, the rate, for example, the structure, the terms, and other stuff. But again, there's also, again, when you deal with a good advisors, they know how to navigate that risk, right? So I'll give you an example where a residential investors that recently want to go to buy a small office space doesn't have any experience, right? But how do you mitigate that risk is that, by hiring a property manager that is specialized in office. That's one way to mitigate the risk, right? So again, there's no black and white in commercial loan. There are a lot of ways
I still remember we were arguing about that, like for my
Yes.
mom's loan, because we were like, my brother is the full-time property manager. He manages our other portfolio.
Right.
We built it through another property. I don't know if
Yes.
we ended up being able to take that off or not, but I remember that was a point where we're like, the DSCR is wrong. Like, but
Exactly.
again, it's like not a science, right? So you can argue it a bit if you have a good story.
Yeah.
And so we can talk to people. And that's why, like, again, I love working with Matt because he's very creative. I always say, like, I know it's like, okay, I can say that. I'm like, Asian people, we're a little bit more, I feel like it's like we're just trying to get shit done. Like we're very solution oriented, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because even my white friends, like, obviously in America, I work with a lot of white people, right? It's normal. I'm not being racist, but like, it's funny because my friends are not Asian will be like, I want to work with you because you're Asian. I was like, why? You're not Asian. I was like, you're white. And they're like, all the Asian people I've hired on my team will get shit done and they're solution oriented. I was like, are you allowed to say that? I was like, you're not even, they're like, it's fine. They're like, I've owned a business for like 10 years. Some of them, they're like, I love hiring Asian people. And so literally like a lot of like my clients, even though they're not Asian, will literally hire, like they will only want to work with me because they're like, I only like to work with Asian people because I know you'll get shit done. And I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
And sometimes it's like that, like, but it's not, I don't think it's just Asian. I think it's the immigrant hustle.
Yeah.
It's that, you're first generation, right?
I'm the
you're
first generation.
Like,
yeah.
Because I noticed that pattern with a lot of Hispanics actually as well. And even like Eastern European, if you're the first generation yourself or you're the child of first generation immigrants, right? No matter what country you're from. Like I have friends that are from like Russia and Poland and, all over the place. But that first generation immigrant or that child of first generation immigrant hustle is just a different kind of like work ethic. I think sometimes it's like, and there are people that are born and raised here that are, that aren't that, but still it's like, I think you have that like hunger and that, I call it immigrant guilt. Like, where you're like, my parents gave up everything to give me this opportunity in the life I have here. I can't fuck this up. Like that's my mentality of like, oh my God, they gave up their life in Taiwan, to come to America, start over new from zero to give my brother and I the life that we have and the opportunities that we have. If I mess this up, it's a disgrace to my family.
Yeah.
That's like how I feel. And, I think when, it's probably similar with you. Like you come here by yourself.
Yeah, I came here by myself at 17.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I came here actually with very little money, just $1,000 actually in my pocket, came here for school.
Yeah.
But then, really believing the American dream.
Yes,
right?
I love the American dream.
Yeah, so
I love it.
as long as you work hard and smart, you will make yourself very successful.
Yes.
So again,
and we're living proof of that.
Yes.
Like you and I are living proof of that. And that's why I was like, actually, it's funny because my YouTube description says like, I'm the living example of the American dream and my passion is helping people achieve their American dream.
Love it.
Because it's true.
Yeah.
You can do anything and accomplish anything you want as long as you have the desire, the faith, and the work ethic to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's the formula for success here in America. So, yay. Well, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
For spending this time and sharing all of your knowledge and insights. I don't know if you have something like your contact info I put in the description of the video if you do, or people can just reach out to me and I'll connect them to you, obviously. And so if you guys are looking to reach out to me, you guys know the best way to do that is go on Instagram, Cathey Quo, same handle as my YouTube, and just slide in my DMs. I always tell you that's the best way to reach me, like Instagram. I still manage my own Instagram, so it's very easy to reach me there. And I'd love to connect you with Matt, or we can answer any of your questions. If you guys have questions, drop them in the comments below on this video, and we can always do a follow-up and answer any questions, because I know there's a lot of terms that are like DSCR, NOI, cap rate. People are going to be like, what is all this? Like, when I start talking to this, I forget because it's like second nature to us, right? We're like, oh, that's normal. And then like I talk to my friends, and even friends that have like 7, 8, 9-figure businesses, but in like tech or in like a different industry, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, I forget, like, and you don't realize when you're in it, like every day. I'm like, DSCR, NRI, cap rate, value add, like, and they're like, I don't understand.
I always have to catch myself.
Yeah, me too.
Like, stop myself. I was like, hold on.
I learned it because I realized, like, I used to, like, I was like, oh, I grew up with this for the past, like, 20-something years of my life. I've known it, in and out. And then I started talking to some very intelligent and successful entrepreneurs who are part of EO, the mastermind I'm a part of. Yeah. And they're like, what are you talking about? I don't know. I don't understand. And I was like, oh, let me explain. Okay. And then so now I realize I have to actually explain DSCR, NOI, cap rate, and all these things. And like,
yeah, and it's very important is that don't be shy. A lot of people always shy. If you don't know,
there's no stupid questions.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or like value add versus like stabilize, and things like that, where people are like, what is value add? What's stabilize? What does that mean? And I was like, there's different types of investments, and that's why you work with someone who knows what they're talking about and who has experienced it. Yeah. And in the commercial industry, it's very different than residential. You usually have to start on a team or with a mentor. I started on a team. I don't know, did you start?
I started with a mentor as well. Yeah, mentor-mentee.
Yeah, because it's all through experience. It's not like residential where you can just kind of learn it. Like you have to really work under someone and have someone take you under their wing to understand the intricacies. So I worked under a team for about 3.5 years before I went out on my own.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of like how I learned. But yeah, if you guys have questions, drop them in the comments below, and like and subscribe. If you guys like content like this, teaching about entrepreneurship, about investing, about building wealth, that's what this channel is all about. Yep. See you guys next time. Thank you.
Thank you.